In the misty shadows of Blackthorn Manor, a single gunshot shatters the silence, leaving Sir Reginald Ashford dead, adorned with mysterious golden cufflinks etched with serpents. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, steps into a web of deceit, where every clue, a hidden passage, a burned scarf, a cryptic letter, points to betrayal. Was it Clara, the heiress with secrets, Leonard, the indebted artist, or Mrs. Marlowe, the housekeeper with a vengeful past? As motives unravel and the serpent's truth slithers free, Poirot's little grey cells race to unmask a killer before the next strike. Dive into the corpse with the golden cufflinks, a chilling Agatha Christie-style mystery where nothing is as it seems. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Guest. The mist clung to the hedgerows of St. Mary's Hollow like a jealous lover, shrouding the village in an October gloom that seemed to whisper secrets. Hercule Poirot, bundled in his overcoat, stepped from the train onto the platform of the tiny station, his polished shoes clicking against the damp stone. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and wood smoke, and Poirot, ever fastidious, adjusted his hat to shield his moustache from the drizzle. He had been summoned to Blackthorn Manor by a letter from Sir Reginald Ashford, a baronet whose name was known to Poirot only through society columns and whispers of his passion for antique jewellery. The letter, penned in a precise hand, had been tantalizingly vague, requesting Poirot's discreet expertise for a matter of utmost delicacy. Such ambiguity was catnip to Poirot's little grey cells. And so, here he was, in a corner of England that seemed to resent the intrusion of modernity. A carriage awaited, driven by a taciturn man named Jenkins, who introduced himself as the butler of Blackthorn Manor. His face, lined and pale, betrayed a flicker of unease as he took Poirot's valise, and his eyes darted toward the manor's silhouette, barely visible through the fog. The journey was short but silent, save for the creak of wheels and the occasional snort of the horses. Poirot observed Jenkins closely, noting the man's rigid posture and the way his gloved hands gripped the reins a fraction too tightly. A household in distress, perhaps, Poirot mused, his mind already weaving possibilities. Blackthorn Manor loomed into view, a sprawling edifice of grey stone, its towers and gables softened by ivy, yet imposing in their age. The windows glowed faintly, like eyes watching the approaching stranger. Inside, the air was warm but thick with the scent of old wood and wax polish. Jenkins led Poirot to the drawing room, where the household awaited. Sir Reginald Ashford, a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and a hawkish nose, rose to greet him. His handshake was firm, but his eyes, sharp and grey, held a shadow of disquiet. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low, "your presence honours us. I trust your journey was tolerable." "Most tolerable, Sir Reginald," Poirot replied, bowing slightly, "but I confess, your letter has piqued my curiosity. A matter of delicacy, you say?" Sir Reginald's smile was tight. "All in good time, Monsieur Poirot. First, allow me to introduce my household." Clara Ashford, his niece, was a young woman of 25, with auburn hair pinned elegantly and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She offered Poirot a polite smile, but her fingers twisted the edge of her shawl, betraying nerves. Beside her stood Leonard Bryce, a lanky artist with tousled hair and a boyish charm that seemed at odds with the manor's sombre air. His bow tie was slightly askew, a detail Poirot noted with interest. The final member was Mrs. Evelyn Marlowe, the housekeeper, a woman of indeterminate age, whose severe black dress and tightly coiled hair gave her the appearance of a governess from a Gothic novel. Her greeting was a curt nod, her gaze cool and assessing. Dinner was served in a dining room adorned with portraits of Ashford's past, their stern faces illuminated by flickering candlelight. The meal was exquisite: roast pheasant, glazed carrots, and a claret that Poirot approved with a nod, but the conversation was stilted. Sir Reginald spoke of his jewellery collection, his voice warming as he described a pair of Renaissance cameos. Yet his words carried an edge, and twice he alluded to a betrayal he feared, glancing at his companions as if testing their reactions. Clara laughed nervously. Leonard focused on his plate, and Mrs. Marlowe's lips thinned. Poirot, sipping his wine, observed them all, his mind cataloguing every gesture, every pause. After dinner, the party retired to the drawing room, but Sir Reginald excused himself, claiming a need to review papers in his study. Poirot, sensing the evening's tension, declined a game of bridge, and instead wandered the manor's halls, admiring the tapestries and noting the locked display cases of jewellery. The house was quiet, save for the distant tick of a grandfather clock. He was about to return to his room when a scream pierced the silence, high and sharp, echoing from the west wing. Poirot hurried toward the sound, his small frame moving with surprising speed. He found Jenkins in the corridor, his face ashen, pointing to the study door. "Sir Reginald," he stammered, he's dead." Inside the study, Sir Reginald lay slumped over his mahogany desk, a crimson stain spreading across the blotter. A bullet had pierced his temple, and his eyes stared blankly into eternity. Poirot's gaze swept the room. Bookshelves, a locked safe, a single window latched from within. On Sir Reginald's wrists gleamed a pair of golden cufflinks, their serpentine design catching the lamplight. Poirot frowned. He had not noticed them at dinner, and stranger still, the right cufflink was fastened incorrectly, the serpent's head facing inward rather than out. Inspector Hargreaves arrived within the hour, a burly man with a moustache that rivaled Poirot's in volume but not in elegance. He surveyed the scene, declared it a clear case of suicide, and pointed to Sir Reginald's troubled demeanour as evidence. Poirot, however, demurred. "Suicide, Inspector? Then where is the pistol? And why, I ask you, would a man so particular about his appearance wear his cufflinks so carelessly?" Hargreaves blinked, unaccustomed to such challenges, but conceded to Poirot's reputation and allowed him to investigate. As the household gathered, shaken and pale, Poirot studied their faces. Clara's eyes were red but dry, Leonard's hands trembled, and Mrs. Marlowe stood rigid, her expression unreadable. Jenkins hovered at the edge, muttering about locking the doors. Poirot's mind buzzed with questions. The cufflinks, the missing weapon, the locked room. Each was a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit. "Murder, mes amis," he murmured to himself, "is never so simple as it seems." And with that, Hercule Poirot set his little grey cells to work, determined to unravel the mystery of the corpse with the golden cufflinks. Chapter 2. The Serpent's Clue. The morning after Sir Reginald Ashford's death dawned cold and grey, the mist over St. Mary's Hollow thickening, as if to shroud Blackthorn Manor's secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the study where the baronet had met his end, his small, neat figure a stark contrast to the room's opulent chaos. The walls were lined with bookshelves, their leather-bound tomes exuding the musty scent of age, while a heavy chandelier cast fractured light across the mahogany desk. Sir Reginald's body had been removed, but the bloodstain on the blotter remained, a grim reminder of the night's tragedy. Poirot's eyes, however, were drawn to the golden cufflinks, now resting in a velvet-lined box on the desk, placed there by Inspector Hargreaves's men. Their serpentine design, each snake curling around an emerald eye, gleamed with an almost malevolent intensity. Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching as he murmured, "Mon Dieu, what secrets do you hold?" The household was subdued, the air heavy with grief and suspicion. Poirot began his investigation with his characteristic precision, requesting Jenkins to summon the others to the drawing room. The butler, still pale from the previous night's shock, complied with a nod, his eyes avoiding the study door. Poirot returned to the scene, examining every detail. The window, latched from within, showed no signs of tampering, and the safe, built into the wall behind a portrait of a Dewar Ashford ancestor, was locked tight. A faint scratch on the desk caught his attention, a fresh mark, as if something metallic had been dragged across it. He filed this away, his mind already weaving threads of possibility. In the drawing room, Clara Ashford sat by the fire, her auburn hair catching the light as she clutched a handkerchief. Leonard Bryce hovered near her, his artist's hands restless, while Mrs. Evelyn Marlowe stood by a window, her severe black dress absorbing the morning's dim glow. Inspector Hargreaves, looking faintly irritated at Poirot's involvement, joined them, notebook in hand. Poirot, with a courteous bow, began his inquiries. "Mademoiselle Clara, these cufflinks," he said, holding up the velvet box, "they are most singular. When did your uncle acquire them?" Clara's eyes flickered to the box, her lips parting slightly. "Only a fortnight ago, Monsieur Poirot. He bought them from a dealer named Mr. Vane, at an auction in London. Uncle was enchanted by them. He said they were from a Balkan noble's estate, though he didn't elaborate." Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened around the handkerchief. Poirot turned to Leonard. "Monsieur Bryce, you are an artist, n'est-ce pas? Did you perhaps sketch these cufflinks for Sir Reginald's collection?" Leonard's boyish charm faltered, his gaze darting to Clara before he answered. "I did, yes. He asked me to catalogue his new acquisitions. I made a quick drawing of the cufflinks last week." His tone was casual, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in his voice, the way his left hand clenched. "And you, Madame Marlowe?" Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fixed on the housekeeper. "Did you see these cufflinks before last night?" Mrs. Marlowe's face remained impassive, her voice cool as frost. "I saw them when Sir Reginald showed them to Miss Clara. I have no interest in such trinkets. My duties keep me in the kitchen or the linen rooms, not admiring jewellery." Her words were clipped, and Poirot sensed a wall of reserve that intrigued him. The detective paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "It is curious, is it not, that Sir Reginald wore these cufflinks only after dinner, and yet they were fastened incorrectly? A man so particular to make such an error, it is not logical." He paused, letting the silence press on the room. Clara flushed. Leonard shifted uncomfortably, and Mrs. Marlowe's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. Poirot requested to see Sir Reginald's papers, hoping for a clue about Mr. Vane. Jenkins brought a ledger from the study, detailing recent purchases. The cufflinks were listed, bought for a staggering sum from Monsieur Van Esk, with an address that proved to be a mere postbox in London's East End. Poirot's moustache twitched again. "This Vane, he is a shadow, non? We must find him." Inspector Hargreaves, growing impatient, interjected. "With all due respect, Monsieur Poirot, the case seems straightforward. Sir Reginald was troubled, as we heard at dinner. He took his own life. The cufflinks are a distraction." Poirot's smile was polite but firm. "A distraction, Inspector? No, they are the heart of the matter. A man does not choose such distinctive ornaments by chance, nor does a suicide vanish his own weapon. We must consider all possibilities." Leaving the drawing room, Poirot ventured outside where the manor's grounds were sodden from the night's rain. Near the study window, he found a footprint in the mud, deep and broad, suggesting a man of considerable size. He measured it carefully, comparing it to Jenkins' boots, which were far too small. An outsider, perhaps, Poirot mused, or a clever ruse. He instructed Hargreaves to cast the print, though the inspector grumbled about the effort. Back inside, Poirot sought out Leonard's sketches, hoping for further insight. In the artist's cluttered shed, he found a portfolio of drawings, including one of the cufflinks. The sketch was meticulous, but the serpent's eyes were drawn as rubies, not emeralds. "An error, Monsieur Bryce?" Poirot asked, presenting the drawing. Leonard blinked, his face paling. A mistake, that's all. I was working from memory. His explanation was too quick, and Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. Next, Poirot questioned Jenkins about the manor's routines. The butler revealed that Sir Reginald had become secretive in recent weeks, locking his study and dismissing the staff early each evening. He was afraid, sir, Jenkins confided, his voice low. He spoke of enemies, collectors who envied his treasures. Lord Percival Crane, for one. He and Sir Reginald quarrelled bitterly at the last auction. Poirot's interest sharpened. This Lord Crane, he is in London. I believe so, sir, Jenkins replied. He sent a telegram this morning, expressing condolences. Poirot made a mental note to investigate Crane. He also learned of a missing key to the study's safe, last seen in Sir Reginald's possession. The safe, when opened by Hargreaves with a spare key, contained only a few minor jewels and a ledger. No weapon or papers of note. Poirot frowned, his mind circling back to the cufflinks. Their presence on Sir Reginald's wrists, their incorrect fastening, suggested a message or a mistake. As the day waned, Poirot stood alone in the study, his gaze fixed on the chandelier's prisms, which cast serpentine shadows across the walls. The serpent, he murmured. It is the key. But to what lock? He knew the answer lay in the delicate interplay of motives and opportunities. A puzzle only his little grey cells could solve. The household, he sensed, held secrets as intricate as the cufflinks themselves, and he would unravel them, one meticulous thread at a time. Chapter 3. Shadows of Motive. The afternoon light filtered weakly through the leaded windows of Blackthorn Manor, casting a pallor over the drawing-room, where Hercule Poirot assembled the household once more. The fire crackled in the grate, but its warmth did little to dispel the chill of suspicion that hung over the group. Clara Ashford sat on a velvet settee, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes darting between Poirot and the floor. Leonard Bryce leaned against the mantel, his usual charm, subdued, a cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. Mrs. Evelyn Marlowe stood apart, her posture as rigid as the oak panelling, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the room. Inspector Hargreaves, his notebook open, hovered near the door, his impatience with Poirot's methods evident in the tap of his pencil. Jenkins, the butler, lingered at the threshold, his presence almost ghostly, as if he feared to intrude on the scene of accusation. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, paced slowly before the hearth, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache a perfect curve of contemplation. Mes amis, he began, his voice soft yet commanding, we stand in the shadow of a crime most heinous. Sir Reginald Ashford was murdered, and the truth, it hides in the motives of those closest to him. Let us, therefore, examine the heart of each person in this room. He turned first to Clara, his eyes kind but piercing. Mademoiselle Ashford, you are the niece of Sir Reginald, and I understand, his sole heir. Blackthorn Manor, its treasures, its wealth, all will pass to you. This is a motive, non? Clara's cheeks flushed, and she rose, her voice trembling with indignation. Monsieur Poirot, how dare you? I loved my uncle. He raised me after my parents died. I would never— She broke off, her eyes filling with tears, and sank back onto the settee. Leonard moved to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder, but his expression was guarded, his eyes avoiding Poirot's scrutiny. Poirot nodded, as if her outburst confirmed something. Bon, mademoiselle. The heart speaks, but the mind must question. Tell me, did Sir Reginald approve of your attachment to Monsieur Bryce? Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting a ring on her hand. He had reservations. He thought Leonard too impulsive, too reliant on his art. But he would have come around. Poirot's gaze shifted to Leonard, who stubbed out his cigarette with unnecessary force. Monsieur Bryce, You are an artist, yes, but one with debts, I am told. Sir Reginald's disapproval, it must have been inconvenient, and his wealth, it would secure your future with Mademoiselle Clara, no? Leonard's jaw tightened, his boyish features hardening. I'm not a gold digger, Poirot. I love Clara, and I'd have married her with or without her uncle's blessing. As for debts, every artist has them. I manage. His tone was defiant, but a bead of sweat glistened on his brow, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. Turning to Mrs. Marlowe, Poirot's voice softened, though his scrutiny did not. Madam, you have served Blackthorn Manor for many years. You knew Sir Reginald well, perhaps better than most. Was there, perhaps, a grievance, a slight from the past that lingered? Mrs. Marlowe's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes cold as the mist outside. I was his housekeeper, Monsieur Poirot, nothing more. My duties were clear, and I performed them. If you seek motives, look to those who stood to gain, not to me. Her words were measured, but Poirot caught a flicker of something, anger, perhaps, or fear, in her expression. Poirot paused, letting the silence press upon them. And what of this Mr. Vane, the seller of the golden cufflinks? No one here has met him, yet his name appears in Sir Reginald's ledger. A ghost, perhaps, or a key to this puzzle. Who can tell me more of him? The room remained silent. Clara shook her head. Leonard shrugged, and Mrs. Marlowe's face was a mask. Jenkins, clearing his throat, ventured, Sir Reginald mentioned Vane only once, sir, when the cufflinks arrived. He said the man was discreet, almost too discreet. I never saw him. Poirot's moustache twitched. Discreet indeed. We shall see. He dismissed the household, requesting they remain available, and turned to Inspector Hargreaves. Inspector, I require your assistance. A telegram to Lord Percival Crane, the rival collector. We must know his movements on the night of the murder. Hargreaves, though sceptical, agreed to send the telegram. Poirot then enlisted Captain Hastings, who had arrived that morning, his cheerful demeanour a welcome contrast to the manor's gloom. Hastings, mon ami, Poirot said, leading him to the study. We must probe the shadows. Lord Crane quarrelled with Sir Reginald over an auction. His envy, it may have driven him to desperate acts. Verify his whereabouts, and quickly. Hastings nodded, his loyalty to Poirot unwavering. Right, I'll get to it. But what about that footprint outside the window? Doesn't it point to an outsider? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The footprint, it is too convenient, no? A clue left to mislead, but we shall investigate all avenues. As Hastings departed for London, Poirot wandered the village, his cane tapping the cobblestones. At the local inn, he encountered Mrs. Tuttle, a stout woman whose gossip was as renowned as her apple tarts. Over tea, she leaned close, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. I saw a man, Monsieur Poirot, the night Sir Reginald died. Near the manor gates, he was, in a dark coat, carrying a small case. Not from these parts, I'd wager. Poirot's interest sharpened. This man, describe him, s'il vous plaît. Tall, thin, with a hat pulled low. He moved quick, like he didn't want to be seen. Near 10 o'clock it was. Mrs. Tuttle's eyes gleamed with the thrill of her tale. Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. Was this Vane, or another player in this deadly game? Returning to the manor, he requested Sir Reginald's correspondence. Among the papers, he found a fragment of a letter, tucked inside a book on Balkan antiquities. The handwriting was elegant, but hurried. The serpent will betray you. The paper matched stationery from Clara's writing desk, a detail Poirot stored away. He confronted Clara privately in the library, where she stood by a shelf of poetry, her face pale. Mademoiselle, this letter, he said, holding up the fragment, it speaks of betrayal. Do you know it? Clara's eyes widened, her hand flying to her throat. I've never seen it before, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it." Her voice cracked, and her trembling hands betrayed her. Poirot, ever courteous, nodded, but noted the fear in her eyes. As dusk fell, Poirot stood alone in the study, his gaze fixed on the portrait above the safe. The ancestor's stern face seemed to watch him, as if guarding the manor's secrets. "The serpent," Poirot murmured. "It weaves through this mystery, but its path is not yet clear." He knew the motives. Greed, love, revenge were tangled like the ivy on Blackthorn's walls, and only his little grey cells could untangle them before the killer struck again. Chapter 4. The Artist's Secret. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across Blackthorn Manor's polished floors, and Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, stood in the cluttered shed that served as Leonard Bryce's studio. The air was thick with the scent of turpentine and charcoal, and sketches littered every surface. Studies of landscapes, portraits, and, most intriguingly, jewellery. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, lingered on a particular drawing pinned to an easel, a detailed rendering of the golden cufflinks, their serpentine forms curling with an almost lifelike menace. But the serpent's eyes, unlike the emerald ones on the cufflinks found on Sir Reginald's wrists, were depicted as rubies, glowing red against the paper. Poirot's moustache quivered slightly, a sign of his mind at work. "A curious discrepancy, no?" he murmured to himself, his fingers brushing the edge of the sketch. Leonard Bryce entered, his lanky frame tense, his eyes wary as they met Poirot's. The artist's usual charm was frayed, replaced by a defensive edge. "Monsieur Poirot, Jenkins said you wanted to see me. I've told you all I know about the cufflinks." His voice carried a forced lightness, but his hands betrayed him, fidgeting with a paintbrush. Poirot smiled, his courtesy disarming. "Monsieur Bryce, your talent is evident. This sketch, it is magnifique, but it puzzles me. The eyes of the serpent, rubies here, yet emeralds on the cufflinks. A mistake, perhaps, or something more?" Leonard's face flushed, and he set the paintbrush down with a clatter. "A mistake, that's all. I sketched them before Sir Reginald showed me the real thing. I imagined rubies, that's all." His words tumbled out too quickly, and Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Imagination, Monsieur Bryce, is a fine thing for an artist, but in a murder, it is the truth we seek. Tell me, what was your relationship with this Mr. Vane, the dealer who sold the cufflinks?" Leonard's eyes darted to the door, as if seeking escape. "I never met him. Sir Reginald handled the purchase. I only drew what he asked." His voice wavered, and Poirot pounced. "Yet your correspondence tells a different tale." Poirot produced a letter, retrieved from Leonard's desk with Jenkins's reluctant assistance. It was from a London gallery, mentioning a special commission for a client named Vane. "Explain, s'il vous plaît." Leonard sank onto a stool, his shoulders slumping. "All right, I'll tell you. I've done some work on the side. Small forgeries, nothing major. Sketches, minor paintings to pay off debts. The gallery connected me with Vane for a commission, but it was just a drawing, not the cufflinks. I swear I didn't know him personally." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Forgery, Monsieur Bryce? A dangerous game. Did Sir Reginald know of this?" "No." Leonard's voice rose, then softened. "He'd have thrown me out. He was particular about authenticity, especially with his collection." Poirot nodded, filing away Leonard's admission. He dismissed the artist, who left with a haunted look, and turned his attention to the manor's other secrets. Captain Hastings had returned from London, his face flushed with the exertion of his inquiries. "Poirot, old chap," he said, bursting into the drawing-room where Poirot sat with a cup of tisane. "Lord Crane's alibi is solid. He was at a charity gala in London the night of the murder, surrounded by 100 guests. I checked with the organisers, his name's on the guest list, and 3 people confirmed seeing him there, until midnight. Poirot sipped his tisane, his expression unperturbed. Bon, Hastings. An alibi so perfect it is almost suspicious, no? But we shall set Lord Crane aside for now. Tell me, what of this Mr. Vane? Hastings shook his head. Nothing concrete. The postbox in London's East End is a dead end. No records, no forwarding address. But I did find something odd. The auction house Sir Reginald used mentioned Vane as a new client, but he paid in cash and left no trace. They described him as tall, thin, with a dark coat. Sounds like Mrs. Tuttle's stranger, doesn't it? Précisément, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. This Vane, he is like a phantom. Yet his cufflinks are at the heart of our mystery. We must dig deeper. Poirot's next move was to examine Mrs. Marlowe's quarters. Suspecting the housekeeper's cool demeanour hid more than she revealed. With Inspector Hargreaves's permission, he searched her Spartan room, finding little at first: a Bible, a sewing kit, a few letters from a sister in Devon. But tucked beneath a drawer's lining was a photograph, yellowed with age. It showed a young woman strikingly similar to Mrs. Marlowe, arm in arm with a man who bore an uncanny resemblance to a younger Sir Reginald. The woman's smile was radiant, the man's expression tender. Poirot's little grey cells hummed. He confronted Mrs. Marlowe in the kitchen, where she was polishing silver with mechanical precision. "Madam," he said, holding up the photograph, "this is you, no? With Sir Reginald, many years ago? There is a story here, I think." Mrs. Marlowe's hands stilled, her face paling beneath her severe bun. "That was a lifetime ago, Monsieur Poirot. I was engaged to Reginald before he chose another, Lillian, his late wife. It was no secret, but it's no concern of yours." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of pain. Poirot pressed gently. "A broken engagement. It leaves scars, does it not? Did you resent Sir Reginald for his choice?" Mrs. Marlowe's lips tightened. "Resent? Perhaps once. But I stayed on as housekeeper out of duty, not love. If you think I killed him, you're mistaken. I was in this kitchen all evening, as Jenkins can confirm." Poirot bowed, his courtesy masking his scepticism. "Merci, madame. But the heart, it is a complex thing, and duty can mask many motives." As night fell, Poirot retired to the study, his mind a whirl of clues: the ruby-eyed sketch, the photograph, the elusive Vane. He stood before the safe, its contents now catalogued by Hargreaves. A few rings, a brooch, but no papers hinting at betrayal. The scratch on the desk nagged at him, a detail that refused to fit. He ran his finger along it, picturing the scene. Sir Reginald, shot at close range, the cufflinks fastened incorrectly. "A message," Poirot murmured, "or a mistake." Outside, the mist thickened, cloaking Blackthorn Manor in secrecy. Poirot knew the truth lay in the interplay of love, greed and vengeance, each motive a thread in the tapestry of murder. Leonard's forgeries, Mrs. Marlowe's past, Clara's silence, all were pieces of the puzzle. But the serpent, with its emerald eyes, remained the key, and Poirot vowed to unlock its meaning before another shadow fell across the manor. Chapter 5. The Stranger's Trace. The mist over St. Mary's Hollow had lifted slightly by mid-morning, revealing Blackthorn Manor's grey-stone facade in stark relief against the sodden lawns. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the chill, stood in the manor's library, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound volumes that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. His mind was a whirl of details. The serpentine cufflinks, Leonard's ruby-eyed sketch, Mrs. Marlowe's hidden photograph, and the elusive Mr. Vane. Each clue was a thread, but the pattern remained maddeningly incomplete. Poirot's little grey cells, however, thrived on such challenges, and he resolved to pursue the phantom figure of Vane, whose shadow loomed ever larger in the mystery. Captain Hastings, ever eager, burst into the library, his face alight with news. "Poirot, I've tracked down something on Vane," he exclaimed, waving a notebook. I went to that postbox in London's East End, as you asked. It led me to a dingy antique shop off Whitechapel. The owner, a shifty chap named Griggs, remembered Vane. Said he was tall, thin, wore a dark coat and hat, just like Mrs. Tuttle described. Sold the way cufflinks to Sir Reginald for a fortune, claimed they were from some cursed Balkan estate. Paid in cash, left no address. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A cursed estate, you say? Très intéressant. Did this Monsieur Griggs describe anything else? Hastings nodded. He said Vane seemed nervous, kept looking over his shoulder. Mentioned something about the cufflinks being marked by betrayal. But Griggs thought it was just sales talk to drive up the price. Betrayal, Poirot murmured, his thoughts circling back to the letter fragment. The serpent will betray you. He thanked Hastings and sent him to telegraph Inspector Hargreaves with this new information, requesting a search for any London records of a dealer named Vane. Poirot suspected the name was a pseudonym, but every clue, however faint, was a step toward the truth. Returning to the manor, Poirot decided to test the household's alibis with a reconstruction of the murder night. He gathered Clara, Leonard, Mrs. Marlowe and Jenkins in the study, where the blood stain on the desk had been scrubbed clean, though its ghost lingered in the room's heavy air. Inspector Hargreaves, grumbling but cooperative, joined them, his notebook at the ready. Poirot, standing by the chandelier, its prisms casting serpentine shadows, began. Mes amis, let us retrace the evening of Sir Reginald's death. Each of you, tell me precisely where you were between 9 and 10 o'clock when the scream was heard. Clara spoke first, her voice steady but her eyes downcast. I was in my room, reading. I heard nothing until Jenkins' cry. Poirot noted her book, a volume of Keats, lying unopened on her bedside table when he had checked earlier. A detail she had not anticipated. Leonard, shifting uncomfortably, said, I was in my studio sketching. I didn't hear anything either. Poirot recalled the untouched pencils in the shed, their tips pristine, and his moustache twitched with suspicion. Mrs. Marlowe, her hands clasped tightly, stated, I was in the kitchen, preparing tea for the staff. Jenkins can confirm I never left. Jenkins nodded, but Poirot caught a fleeting glance from Mrs. Marlowe toward a panel in the study wall, barely discernible behind a bookcase. His eyes narrowed. Jenkins himself claimed to have been in the servants' hall, polishing silver until he heard Clara's scream. His alibi was corroborated by a maid, but Poirot noted the butler's unease, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. The reconstruction complete, Poirot dismissed the group, but his attention lingered on the panel Mrs. Marlowe had glanced at. Alone in the study, he examined it, finding a hidden catch that revealed a narrow passage, its walls damp and cobwebbed. It led to the kitchen, a secret route known only to the manor's oldest residents. Poirot's mind raced. Such a passage could allow a killer to enter and leave undetected, explaining the locked room. But who knew of it? Mrs. Marlowe certainly, given her long tenure. Sir Reginald, perhaps. Clara, unlikely, but not impossible. That evening, Poirot searched the manor's hearths, suspecting evidence might have been burned. In the drawing-room fireplace, among the ashes, he found a scrap of fabric, charred but intact enough to reveal a delicate embroidery. A serpent, identical to the cufflinks design. It matched a scarf Clara had worn at dinner, a detail Poirot had noted for its elegance. He summoned Clara to the library, holding the fragment before her. Mademoiselle, this scarf, it is yours, no? Why was it burned? Clara's face drained of colour, her hands clutching the arms of her chair. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I lost that scarf days ago. Someone must have taken it. Her voice rose, tinged with panic, and Poirot saw genuine fear in her eyes. He pressed no further, but the seed of doubt grew. Had Clara burned it to hide evidence, or was she being framed? Poirot's thoughts returned to the cufflinks. Their incorrect fastening nagged at him. A deliberate act, he was certain, but by whom? Sir Reginald, to signal his killer? Or the murderer, in haste? He requested Jenkins to fetch Sir Reginald's clothing from the night of the murder, now stored by the police. Examining the shirt, Poirot found a faint smudge of charcoal on the cuff, invisible to the untrained eye. Charcoal, like that in Leonard's studio. Yet Leonard claimed to have been sketching, not near the study. Another thread, another question. As night enveloped the manor, Poirot stood by the study window, gazing into the darkness. The footprint outside, the secret passage, the burned scarf, all pointed to a carefully orchestrated crime, yet the motives remained tangled. Clara's inheritance, Leonard's debts, Mrs. Marlowe's past, each held a piece of the puzzle. But Vane, the stranger in the dark coat, was the missing link. "The serpent," Poirot whispered, his breath fogging the glass. "It slithers through every clue, but its head remains hidden." He resolved to tighten the net, knowing the killer was closer than the household dared admit, and that the next revelation would bring him one step nearer to unmasking the truth. Chapter 6. The Hidden Truth. The drawing-room of Blackthorn Manor was steeped in the hush of early evening, the fire's glow casting flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled household. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's centre, his small, immaculate figure commanding attention, as surely as a general on a battlefield. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over Clara Ashford, Leonard Bryce, Mrs. Evelyn Marlowe, and Jenkins, each seated or standing in a posture of uneasy anticipation. Inspector Hargreaves leaned against the doorframe, his skepticism softened by the growing realization that Poirot's methods, however theatrical, were yielding results. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, sat near the hearth, his notebook open, ready to record the denouement. The air was thick with the weight of secrets about to be unveiled, and Poirot, with a slight adjustment of his tie, began. "Mes amis," he said, his voice low but resonant, "we have gathered to unravel the mystery of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder. A crime, it seems, of precision and passion, hidden behind the facade of a locked room and a missing weapon. But the truth, it is like the serpent on those golden cufflinks. It coils, it conceals, yet it cannot escape the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot." He paced slowly, his cane tapping the floor with deliberate rhythm. "Let us begin with the cufflinks, those singular ornaments found on Sir Reginald's wrists. They were not worn at dinner, yet appeared after fastened incorrectly, the serpent's head facing inward. Why? Was it haste? Non, mes amis, it was a signal. Sir Reginald, fearing betrayal, chose these cufflinks to point to his killer, a clue only a mind as particular as his would devise." Clara gasped softly, her hands tightening in her lap. Leonard's jaw clenched, while Mrs. Marlowe's eyes narrowed, her face a mask of control. Jenkins shifted, his gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot continued, undeterred. The footprint by the window, so large and so convenient, was a deception, meant to suggest an outsider. But the study's locked door, the absence of the pistol, these point to someone within this house, someone who knew its secrets. He turned to the panel in the wall, now revealed as a secret passage. This passage, known to few, leads from the kitchen to the study. Only one among you has served long enough to know it. Madame Marlowe. The housekeeper's head snapped up, her lips parting, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, madame. We shall come to you." Poirot's gaze shifted to Leonard. "Monsieur Bryce, your sketches of the cufflinks, with ruby eyes instead of emerald, were no mere error. You knew of Mr. Vane, a name tied to a syndicate of forgers, non? Your debts drove you to create false artworks, and Sir Reginald's collection was a temptation. But did you kill him? I think not. Your fear is real, but it is of discovery, not of murder." Leonard exhaled, his shoulders sagging, but Clara's eyes widened, her hand reaching for his. Poirot turned to her, Mademoiselle Clara, you found the letter fragment, 'The serpent will betray you,' in your uncle's desk. You recognized the handwriting, did you not? Yet you said nothing, hoping to protect someone you love." Clara's voice was a whisper. I couldn't believe it was true. I thought it was a mistake." Poirot nodded, his expression softening, but he moved on, his focus now on Mrs. Marlowe. "Madame, your past with Sir Reginald was no secret to my little grey cells. The photograph, your engagement, his choice of another. These left a wound, a motive for revenge. The handwriting on the letter fragment, it matches yours, found in a note to your sister. You knew the secret passage, and you used it." Mrs. Marlowe rose, her face pale but defiant. "You accuse me, Monsieur Poirot, with no proof. I was in the kitchen, as Jenkins said." "Oui, madame, but the passage allowed you to slip into the study unseen. You confronted Sir Reginald, who threatened to expose your past, perhaps a secret from your youth, a scandal that would ruin you. You took the pistol from his safe, a weapon he kept for protection, and shot him. In your haste, you fastened the cufflinks incorrectly, not knowing their significance. You burned Clara's scarf to cast suspicion and hid the pistol in the passage, hoping to retrieve it later." Mrs. Marlowe's composure cracked, her voice rising. "I loved him once, yes, but I stayed out of duty. He betrayed me, chose Lillian, and then dared to judge me. That night, he said he'd tell the world of my indiscretions. I couldn't let him destroy me." Her words spilled out, a confession torn from years of buried pain. Inspector Hargreaves stepped forward, his face grim. "Mrs. Marlowe, you'll come with me." She straightened, her defiance returning, and allowed herself to be led away, her footsteps echoing in the silent manor. Poirot turned to the others. The serpent's clue was Sir Reginald's last act, a warning from beyond the grave. But there is more, I fear, to be uncovered. He glanced at Clara, whose tears now fell freely, and Leonard, whose relief was tempered by guilt. Jenkins, silent, slipped from the room, his role in the drama minor, but not unnoticed. As the household dispersed, Poirot lingered, his mind restless. The confession was tidy, but the pistol's hiding place, the charcoal smudge, the burnt scarf, these nagged at him. He murmured to Hastings, "The puzzle is nearly complete, mon ami, but one piece remains out of place. We must find it, or the serpent may strike again." The manor settled into an uneasy quiet, its secrets partially laid bare. But Poirot knew the truth was never so simple. The golden cufflinks, now locked in Hargreaves's evidence box, still held a whisper of mystery, and Poirot's little grey cells would not rest until every shadow was banished. Chapter 7. The Final Piece. The dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor with a reluctant light, as if the sun itself hesitated to illuminate the secrets still clinging to the ancient stones. Hercule Poirot sat in the library, a cup of steaming tisane in hand, his eyes fixed on the portrait of a stern Ashford ancestor, whose gaze seemed to challenge him to uncover the last truth. Mrs. Marlowe's confession had unravelled much of the mystery surrounding Sir Reginald's murder, yet Poirot's little grey cells remained restless. The pistol's absence, the charcoal smudge on Sir Reginald's cuff, the burned scarf fragment, each was a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious solution. Poirot, ever the perfectionist, could not abide an incomplete symphony. He summoned Captain Hastings, who entered with his usual vigour, though his face bore the strain of the case. "Poirot, you've done it again," Hastings said, settling into a chair. Mrs. Marlowe's confession was a shock, but it fits. Why the long face? The case is closed, isn't it? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his unease. "Non, mon ami. The confession, it is too neat, like a suit tailored too quickly. The pistol, where is it? And why the charcoal on Sir Reginald's cuff, when Monsieur Bryce claims he was sketching elsewhere? We must tie the final knot." Poirot requested Inspector Hargreaves's assistance for one last search, focusing on the secret passage Mrs. Marlowe had used. The inspector, though weary, complied, his respect for Poirot's methods now outweighing his initial skepticism. With Jenkins' reluctant guidance, they re-entered the narrow, cobwebbed corridor connecting the kitchen to the study. The air was damp, the walls rough under Poirot's gloved fingers. Near the study's end, he noticed a loose brick, its edges slightly misaligned. With care, he pried it free, revealing a small cavity. Inside lay a pistol, its barrel gleaming faintly, and a folded note. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he unfolded it, reading aloud, "If I die, seek the serpent." The handwriting was Sir Reginald's, unmistakable from his ledger. A final message, Poirot murmured, confirming his fear of betrayal. But why hide it here? The pistol, a small caliber revolver, matched the wound on Sir Reginald's temple, and Poirot noted a faint smudge of charcoal on its grip, a match to the mark on the cuff. Back in the drawing room, Poirot gathered Clara, Leonard and Jenkins, with Hargreaves and Hastings in attendance. The atmosphere was heavy, the household still reeling from Mrs. Marlowe's arrest. Poirot held up the pistol and note, his voice calm but commanding. "This weapon, mes amis, was hidden in the passage along with Sir Reginald's warning. It confirms Madame Marlowe's guilt, but there is more. Mademoiselle Clara, you knew of your uncle's fears, did you not? You found the letter fragment and recognized the handwriting as Madame Marlowe's, yet you remained silent." Clara's face crumpled, her voice barely a whisper. I couldn't believe it, Monsieur Poirot. I saw the letter in his desk days before, but I thought it was a mistake. I didn't want to accuse her without proof, and I wanted to protect Leonard." Her eyes darted to her suitor, who looked away, his expression clouded. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Leonard. "Monsieur Bryce, the charcoal on the pistol and Sir Reginald's cuff. It comes from your studio, no? You were not sketching that night, as you claimed. You were in the study, perhaps witnessing something you did not wish to admit." Leonard's hands clenched, his voice hoarse. "I didn't kill him, Poirot. I swear it. I went to the study to ask for a loan, to settle my debts. He was alive, agitated, talking about betrayal. I saw him put on the cufflinks, muttering about a signal. I left through the main door, not the passage. I didn't touch the pistol." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "And yet, you did not speak of this visit. Your silence, it protected the killer, even if unwittingly." He turned to the group. "The truth, it is now clear. Madame Marlowe, driven by a past betrayal, used the passage to confront Sir Reginald. He, sensing danger, wore the cufflinks as a clue, fastening them incorrectly to mark his killer. She shot him, hid the pistol, and burned Mademoiselle Clara's scarf to mislead us. But the charcoal, it came from a moment of struggle, perhaps when Sir Reginald grasped the pistol, marking both it and his cuff." Hargreaves, holding the evidence, nodded. "That seals it, Monsieur Poirot. The case is solid now." Poirot inclined his head, but his expression remained pensive. He addressed Clara gently. "Mademoiselle, your loyalty to Monsieur Bryce is admirable, but the truth, it must always prevail. Your silence allowed a killer to linger among us." Clara's tears fell freely, and she turned to Leonard. "I thought I was protecting you, but I only made it worse." Leonard took her hand, his face a mix of guilt and relief. But Poirot noted the strain between them, a fracture that might not heal. As the household dispersed, Jenkins lingered, his voice low. "Sir Reginald was a hard man, sir, but he didn't deserve this. Thank you for finding the truth." Poirot bowed slightly. "It is my duty, Monsieur Jenkins." He and Hastings prepared to depart, the manor's oppressive air lightening with the resolution of the crime. Outside, the mist had cleared, revealing the rolling hills of St. Mary's Hollow. Poirot paused at the gate, his cane tapping the ground. "Hastings, mon ami, the serpent has been tamed, but the heart, it remains a mystery." Mademoiselle Clara and Monsieur Bryce. Their love may yet falter under the weight of this truth. Hastings, ever practical, shrugged. You've done your part, Poirot. Let them sort out the rest. Poirot smiled faintly, his eyes distant. Oui, but the little grey cells, they never rest. As they boarded the carriage for the station, Blackthorn Manor receded into the distance, its secrets laid bare, but its shadows lingering in Poirot's mind, a testament to the complexity of human motives and the relentless pursuit of justice.